review from ETC. I think just for a little context, I think this is meant to be more of a just, here's the results. Let's look at them, ask questions about, results, but not really like a big open discussion about what it all means and what's the meaning of life and all of these good things. I think next month we'll have Barry down here. And that's kind of meant to be the more holistic conversation about it. And Chad, is that accurate?
Yes, well said. Thank you. Appreciate it. Right. So really energy tonight is focused on survey results, questions related to the survey. And as Pete alluded to, Teresa will be joining us next month in person. So we can vet out any other questions and most importantly, provide a very comprehensive update for both Park and Rec and open space happenings. So that's the intro and welcome. Welcome, Barry Dunn, to Park and Rec Board, January 2025. So we're double checking recording. We're up. Okay. All right. I'm going to turn it over to the team and let you begin the presentation.
All right, fantastic, Chad. Thank you very much. It's good to be here with you this evening and to see everyone again. I'm also looking forward to being there in February, where we can start to dive more into some of our analysis and some of our in-person engagement, really starting to form a full needs assessment, with this survey being one aspect of that. So tonight joining me, I have Ryan Murray with ETC Institute, and Ryan is going to give you a really detailed presentation of some of the survey findings, as well as some of the aspects related to developing the survey and how their sorry, it's getting close to my bedtime. No, just kidding. How their firm has worked with the City of Golden to develop that survey. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Ryan.
Ryan, we can't hear you, buddy.
Well, it wouldn't be a virtual meeting without me talking on mute. Can everybody see everything as well?
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic.
We can see you, but
no,
you're
we
not
could, but then it stopped. Yeah.
Okay, and do you see the presentation, I hope?
There we go.
Very good. Okay, perfect. So as Teresa mentioned, I'm with the ETC Institute. Just real quick, we've been around for about 40 years. We specialize in market research for government organizations. We work with many of the local communities near you all, a lot of local municipalities. But our mission really is to help local governments make better decisions with statistically valid research. And so that's kind of our objective for these processes and these projects. And when I present results, which I always find a pleasure to be able to do, because you get that unique perspective from the consultant. And so each one of us has this unique reason or bias to the view of the results. And so you all are subject matter experts. I'm the survey guy. Teresa's a subject matter expert. And so I look at things just slightly differently. And by explaining the purpose of the survey through our lens, I think that I can help you kind of begin to see what I'm seeing as well. And so this is an objective feedback tool. It's really a snapshot in time of how people think, feel, believe. And really a lot of these questions are related to how do you think, what do you support, what's most important to you. And so it's really an objective feedback tool meant to really gather as many opinions as we possibly can here. It's going to help shape the future of the city's Parks and Recreation open space plan, but really the core intent of this survey is to be a puzzle piece and a really, really large engagement puzzle. And Barry Dunn does a really good job of all these different engagement methods. And this is one piece that has a little bit of a statistical backbone to lean on that can tell you a little bit more about the insights of the average resident in the community, those folks that we don't always see at our engagement meetings, and those people that don't normally take surveys that through my follow-up attempts, I was able to eke out some of those responses. One of the other core features of our work is that we develop priorities based on the survey results with intent in design. And so we design the surveys in a way to leverage some of our analysis types. We typically call this our priority investment ratings analysis, which is a suggestive analysis that tells us about needs and ratings. And we'll see some of that this evening. But also a part of this is to really understand the methodology. And so we mailed out a 6-page survey to a random sample of about 2,000 households from throughout the city. That 2,000 households is randomly selected from a list of about 8,000 overall residential addresses from the city. Based on those 2,000 homes, we'll mail a survey packet that will have online information as well as a phone number, as well as different languages options for completing that survey, either online, over the phone, or by paper. Based on our multiple follow-up attempts, we were able to complete 433 completed surveys. And while we don't deep dive into those demographics tonight, the demographics do accurately match or portray the actual city's demographics based on a comparison to the most recently available census statistics. When we do the random sampling, when we ensure the demographics are representative of the community, we can apply a margin of error or a confidence level to those results. And based on the completion of 433 surveys, we're able to assess that the overall results have a margin of error of about 4.5%. I'm going to use that kind of average language there, but it's really 4.66% at the 95% level of confidence. So using that 4.5%, basically, any given instance, 95 out of 100 times, if we were to go to the community 100 times, complete 433 surveys, 95 out of 100 times, we would receive these same results, plus or minus that margin of error of about 4.5%. So in that instance, if we get a 50-50 breakdown on a yes/no question, it could be about as high as about 54.5% or about as low as 46.5% or 45.5%. And so that's kind of how that margin of error works, how we apply it to the results, and how reliable that data is. When we talk about what to know, I do like to run through some of our overall benchmarking, just some of the major things that we find in the survey. And what we found is that the community is extremely active. Almost all of our respondents, 97%, indicated that they visited at least a park or a recreation facility in the past year. Nationally, it's closer to about 81% when we do our national benchmarking survey. So the city's actually, in terms of overall usage and participation, touch points is sometimes the term that I use, you're very high. You're well above the national average. When we talk about participation in programs during the past year, that's where we see just slightly below that national average of about 36% in the national average compared to about 1 in 4 in our survey sample. But the community is extremely active. It just sounds like there's not a lot of active participation or not as much participation as we see nationally in programs that are actually being managed by the city, it seems. But when we talk about most used providers in the community, the city of Golden still tops the list. So folks do recognize and realize the types of services and amenities and facilities that you're providing. And we could see that 81% of folks indicated, hey, we are using the city of Golden as one of our recreation providers. We also had other nearby cities and other nearby recreation districts come in second and third, but that was quite the drop off after we say 81% selected city of Golden compared to other cities or other nearby districts. When we talk about the open space plan, there were a few questions that were just very high level understandings of opinions or understandings of what open space might mean to the individual. When we asked respondents what they'd like to see prioritized in the city's open space master plan, it was really protection from urban development and expansion, conservation of natural habitats and wildlife, and the preservation and protection of Clear Creek and the surrounding waterways when we were offering those choices. As I mentioned earlier, one of the designed or baked in features of our surveys is our priority investment ratings analysis. And based on that analysis, developed priorities both for facilities and amenities and programs and activities. Kind of understanding this was a little bit of a mixed topic survey in the sense that we had some recreation facility items and then a couple of open space questions as well. We determined that trails were really the winner when it comes to amenities as well as a community center. We also have outdoor amphitheater, outdoor performing arts venue, which is pretty topical or at least popular in some of those communities that we've surveyed over the last couple of years near you. When we talk about programs and activities, it's nice to see some of those programs could fit directly with a community center or an outdoor amphitheater or venue. And then there's just some other types of programs that would be recreational swim, which is pretty popular, mountain biking programs. We see tennis and pickleball grouped there and pottery classes for all ages, which is just a little bit unique to your community. We don't ask that all the time, but it was cool to see that as a top priority. When we talk about usage,
Ryan, can I
please
ask you a question, Book? When you say surrounding communities, are we talking mostly like Metro Denver Front Range,
Yes.
or is that communities, kind of isolated communities? I'm guessing if we compare Golden to say like a Wheat Ridge or Arvada, where there's other municipalities immediately next door, and Golden is kind of separated more than those, but
yeah,
I'm just kind of
you're
trying to
right.
wrap my head around what those comparisons are.
Yeah, I'm thinking Thornton and Westminster kind of front of mind, but we've worked with I'm working with Arvada now. We've also worked with Apex within the last few years, Pueblo, and then I've also worked with Rifle and Fruta, which are kind of even further west than you all are on the other side there. I've also do Snowmass Villages survey, and so there would maybe be some additional comparisons. But when I'm speaking kind of that nature, of that anecdotal nature, it is pretty typical for me to kind of lump in some of those more recent ones that are kind of in that Front Range area. However, trails are commonly nationwide some of our highest priority facility and amenity types. So that's not really a Colorado thing particularly, but some of the unique items like mountain biking programs, pottery, mental health education are unique to your area in a sense. And some of those things we did see, I believe, in the Thornton survey, and we're working on their community survey now, and I'll have a couple of those aspects as well.
Okay, thank you.
Great point. Great point. Golden is a little bit further removed than some of our other clients that I was mentioning earlier, although we do have that experience kind of on the other side of the mountains as well. So when we get to usage of the system, I already went through those major figures, but because of those massive amount of touch points, I want to kind of harp on the fact that you've had a high overall excellent good rating here. So 94% of respondents, when they were asked to rate the overall quality of the parks and facilities they visited over the last year, excellent and good really took the cake. About 6% were in fair. We do have a poor rating there as well. No poor ratings were provided for this particular question. So 97% of people answered this question. Overall ratings phenomenal. What I will typically indicate to clients is that as your touch points go up, the opportunities for having a bad day, a trash can is spilled over, something goes wrong, increase. You don't seem to have found that in your survey results, which is just really nice. It just means you're really upkeeping that system, and we'll see some of that in other places as well. We also asked about the quality of the recreation programs. We only have 1% indicating poor. This is only based on 25% of folks who indicated they participated, but still a single touch point for the most part. And that is expected. Nationally, we get about 3% of respondents who indicate that they've had a poor experience in the recreation program they participated in. When we talk about national numbers, again, it's about a combined 75% excellent good ratings. You are above that at about 92%. And so again, phenomenal work. Staff really, I think, is attributed to most of these quality of our programs and quality of our facilities. Staff is doing a phenomenal job with good leadership there in the organization, it seems. When we talk about some of these open space questions, I've got a couple of more later on. There were a couple of questions to start out with open space that really just asked generally, what would you think or what would you prefer to do in open spaces? And this included a variety of use types that are and are not common to open space offerings in most communities. But as a place to hike, bike, and run really was the most commonly selected item. Thinking about some of our priorities in terms of our facility amenity development, trails being that top item, it makes sense that respondents are in that hike, bike, or run mentality. We also saw mountain biking programs as one of our programmatic priorities or investment areas. And so that is another sense that respondents want to be active, they are active. Sometimes it's just an educational piece and they should really be educated on what open space might actually be intended or used for in the future. But we also asked respondents about that organizational piece. And even though I kind of harped on that in the beginning, I wanted to just show you visually that 81% really stands out. And I know to the other point that was just made, you're not necessarily in that metropolitan area, but you are that primary provider. Considering the high level of usage of your facilities, these are just really strong ratings. And that's comparison to our national benchmarking there. When we get into those priorities that I've been mentioning, we talk about unmet needs and support or investment areas. What we're really trying to assess first with those questions is to determine the overall need for the programs that were listed. And so the idea is based on the percentage of respondents who indicated that they have a need, we'll have them rate how well those needs are being met. And so there's a proportional aspect to this. Down at the bottom, e-gaming, esports, only 5% of households indicated someone in their home has a need for that particular programming type. Comparatively, we have 74% of folks that said, hey, we could use adult fitness and wellness programs potentially. When you rate that level of need, this chart is predicated on those folks who indicated, yes, I have that need. And so if you can find, and I know it's difficult, there was a lot of items on this list. We typically get about 30 or 35 items on this list, but e-gaming and esports is right in the middle. And you kind of see a jutting out of about a 38% pink bar there, and that's the not met bar. You might say to yourself, wow, 40% of folks indicated that esports or esports gaming is not being met in the community. But you must always keep in mind that in the prior chart, it was only based on 5% of respondents. And so you extrapolate those results, it might be up to 10% of respondents or community members, but it's really a household-based survey. So we're looking at this a little bit differently of about those 8,000 households. And so proportionally, that need begins to wane. And so I kind of like to try to illustrate that there are other items on this list, that there are other reasons why they might come higher or lower. But when we look here, some of those specific youth programs, youth fitness, preschool programs, you really have to have a youth of that type in your home to have that type of need. So that's why they do fall below that kind of average or middle line on these charts. And that's why it's really important to make the point that this is based only on the percentage of households who have a need. When we get to the follow-up question, we ask respondents to force rank what are the most important activities or programs to your household, kind of equating importance to potential enrollment or potential usage. And we see again adult fitness and wellness programs towards the top, but keeping in mind every household had to have an adult. So every respondent was an adult to the survey. We get down all the way to the bottom, and a few people selected as their fourth choice e-gaming or esports. And so that does put e-gaming and esports at the bottom of our priority investment ratings analysis. But if you're offering that programming segment, the analysis does not suggest that you stop it. It suggests that you're meeting what need exists in the community. And there's likely some educational pieces that could go to meet that 38% of the 5% who have a need that they think it's being unmet. As we work our way up this list, we're impacting a greater and greater number of households, and we really just try to put a line on this somewhere for our consulting. And so at 100, we say that is where you're going to really start to meet a greater level of unmet need for those programs and activities. So we relate this as a method of saying, hey, investments in programs in the red or at the higher ends of this list should equate could equate potentially to program usage in the future. Another key point as I present the priority investment ratings analysis is that our survey is a single puzzle piece in a really large engagement puzzle. So this can guide some discussion, it can guide some ideas, but by no means are we using this to decide what programs exist and don't exist in the future. And so I just like to make sure that that's really well met or known while we're looking at this. So those items towards the bottom, likely need is being met if we're offering or it's being offered in the community, or the level of need is relatively low compared to items towards the tops of the lists. We did the same type of analysis with amenities. It was a similar length list with different amenities and facility types. Bocce ball court, a little bit more unique. Archery facilities, disc golf always hovers towards the bottom. It's just kind of a unique use type. And when we talk about needs, again, we're proportionally basing that bocce ball court need. So 57% of folks who indicated they had a need said that their needs were not met. Again, that's really proportionately based on a small proportion of people. When we talk about importance, there's a few folks or a few items up there towards the top that really take the cake. Large community parks, neighborhood parks, community centers. And as we look at facilities and amenities, I like to remind people that regardless of age or ability, the items towards the top of these lists are typically items that you could use. And so you could usually get on soft trails or paved trails or go to a community center or a neighborhood park, regardless of age or ability. When we get towards the bottom and middles of these lists, it does typically turn into a little bit more unique use cases. But we're blending both the levels of need and the levels of importance and determining which items are kind of at the higher ends of those lists. And those are, again, community amenity types that really could serve everybody within the community. It again does not mean that we need to rip out diamond sports fields. We do not need to remove our archery facility. We just need to continue investments in those areas as we are currently and continuing them if we're offering them. So again, I'm sure the city offers disc golf. We shouldn't unplant the disc golf chains. We should continue to offer disc golf in the same way that we're continuing to offer it. Or if you do a survey in 5 years and you've ripped out all the disc golf, you've ripped out your diamond sports fields, those items will be those high priorities. And so that's kind of how that analysis works there. We also ran an important satisfaction analysis on the results. This is more of a service level analysis type where we asked to rate satisfaction with areas. One of the areas with the lower levels of satisfaction was the maintenance and upkeep of park restrooms, a common area of constraint or of confusion for residents from time to time. I'm an alderman in a community with about 6,000, 7,000 people. It's a council member. Our bathrooms and restrooms are the thing I hear about almost the most, besides the snow plowing when we get snow. So that's a common gripe or common complaint of community members. But the analysis is really meant to eke out which items are below average satisfaction, and then in a follow-up forced ranking question, slightly above average importance. And so which of these items now do we think that we should put the most emphasis into over the next couple of years is what we've asked respondents. Based on the below average satisfaction slightly, and based on the above average importance, the maintenance and upkeep of restrooms was one of our highest opportunities for improvement there. What the analysis is really suggesting is that if we're able to maintain and upkeep our park restrooms to a higher degree than we have in the past, effectively increasing satisfaction in that single item, we should be able to upkeep or maintain or increase satisfaction overall with the park system or within each one of these other areas. I've highlighted that item as red because according to our analysis, it is the only high priority item determined, but the upkeep of parks was that item that is just on the edge there. Now, I want to explain that 82% satisfaction is phenomenal. It's almost everybody given margin of error. It's very close to 90%. 54% of people also said that's really important that you continue to do that. There's also a maintenance of trails, 85% satisfaction, 56% importance. A lot of this table is really just telling us continue the good work, continue the high level of service that you're offering to us in these areas, and we are going to continue to be satisfied with these areas. We do see a couple of areas like the dog park, which has some of our lowest levels of satisfaction along with the Grandpa's Gym, but those items are significantly less important to respondents. So even a significant increase in satisfaction in those areas would unlikely equate to satisfaction in other areas or satisfaction with value being increased in other areas. When we talk about open space, as I mentioned earlier, we had kind of an opinion-based, what would you potentially do if you could do something in open space? But we had a couple of other items that included more open space specific items. And so in question 8, we asked which 3 in a forced ranking style question of these open space types should be prioritized in Golden's open space master plan. So based on the selection of respondents, protection from urban development, conservation of natural habitats and wildlife, and preservation or protection of clear creeks, surrounding waterways, and water quality really received the bulk of responses. We get down towards the bottom of that list, and only 6% of respondents selected that educational item. And that was very similar to when we asked about the preferred use types. Education, that history item kind of hung out towards the bottom. So that's some opportunities for education, because we also see historic sites and some of that education component down here as well. When we asked in a secondary question, we indicated we're committed to enhancing the city's open spaces. From the list below, what 3 actions do you believe would most positively impact the community? Respondents, similar to the preference question earlier, indicated they'd like you to acquire additional open space for public use. Now, that public use type might be a little bit confused for some respondents in terms of what we can and cannot do, but they are equating some of their use types in different questions across the survey to the same area. But they also indicate to a high level, almost 50%, we should be protecting and enhancing wildlife habitats. We see down towards the bottom, managing and controlling noxious weeds or providing more off-leash dog areas, kind of not quite meeting that muster in terms of that about quarter of respondents or more selecting them. And so there's kind of a clear 2 or 3 scales there of response types. So a few additional findings, and I apologize, I know I'm very long, Teresa can attest to this, but we asked what priorities based on their perspective of community and value or individual or family engagement. Or just a few areas here that I thought were highlighted by the respondents: Clear Creek corridor improvements, capital project reinvestments in existing parks, and land acquisition for park development and or open space property. So kind of theming that up again, hey, acquire more open space. When we talk about level of agreement with the city of Golden should reduce pesticides, knowing this will increase the level of weed bloom, we had a very strong level of strongly agree, wrapping in some of that neutral into that particular category really does outweigh the about 19% who disagreed with that statement. We talked about communication. We found out that the Informer and the website were the 2 most preferred and used sources of information, which equates very much so to your usage of your parks and facilities, as well as the overall quality, excellent, good ratings of your system when we asked. And one of the other things that we found is that people in Golden really value high quality recreation facilities and programs, and they're extremely satisfied with what's being offered. Only 4%, and I'm a proportions guy, I'm a percentage person. When we talk 4% compared to 96%, either neutral, satisfied, or very satisfied, with the bulk of those responses in blue, you know that you're doing something right. And again, this is a testament to leadership and staff promoting and maintaining a very quality system that seems to be meeting a lot of community need. And there seems to be a few opportunities for future open space and rec need as well. So with that, I'll take any questions best as I can. If I can't answer anything in a timely fashion, I'll get a written response back to Teresa for you all.
Real quick, I just disclaimer, we're recording this. This presentation will be posted on Guiding Golden for all of the community to see. You're welcome to go back and visit it again, but just so everybody knows that this presentation is being recorded and will be posted publicly.
Thank you.
Yeah, nice job. You're a great presenter. That was very understandable with a lot of hard to read data. So
Yeah, there's a lot in there. One thing I always make myself available to Barry Dunn and Teresa specifically, additional questions. If you get later down the line and you need some more cross tabulations, please just let us know.
So I have a question with regard to why you didn't analyze the open survey data. Why was your analysis limited to what you solicited when you encouraged citizens to go to the website, fill out the survey? Why was that data ignored in your analysis?
Yeah, typically we don't report too much on the open source data, primarily because those folks have an opinion. And what we're trying to do with the random sampling is really reduce the response bias or that opinion bias that we can have. And so when we talk about parks, recreation, open space survey, we're going to draw out a lot of proponents of our system, of our parks system. We know that there's a lot of active users in the community. And so by randomly sampling the community, you can kind of cut through some of that noise and get a more balanced perspective of what the average Golden resident believes. Now, we still have that data. We can report on it. I think I've been talking with Teresa. There's not a ton of it, but we can definitely report on it. And it's really just to be used as anecdotal supporting evidence. And so it's kind of a nice to know, but those are folks you're already typically hearing from. And so that's why we focus all of our work on statistically valid research to ensure that you're making good decisions on good data.
And
Can I ask how
Ryan,
many people did weigh in on the open survey? What was the number of respondents?
Yeah, I don't have that in front of me, but I can get that to Teresa.
And Ryan, your team, as they go through the open link surveys, I believe there's a question related to address. And so if that person was actually identified to take the statistical, it's moved over.
Yes. So anybody that completes the survey, if they fill out the verification question at the end, if the verified address matches one we selected at random for the sample, their response was included in the 433. If anybody completed the survey, didn't include an address, didn't complete it fully, potentially including that address aspect, or provided an address we did not randomly select, their results would have been held separate. And so Teresa, I don't know if you remember the rough idea. I've got like about 4 of these going on right now, and they range from maybe 30 surveys to 100 surveys. So in my head, I just don't have the numbers off the top of my head. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think we're in the 70s, but we will get that number right away.
Sure. And yeah, I think you're right. It was like 60 and then it jumped. And I believe that the plan was, and I apologize if this is not Pima County's plan, but was it to process the results in February, or am I thinking Arizona?
No, you're thinking of another.
I
Yeah.
apologize.
This one was specific. It was low numbers, and we pulled over the ones that could be validated as pre-selected to take the survey.
Yep. And so we can process that again. Knowing sample sizes, knowing statistics, it could be very misleading to look into those results and suggest that they might take precedent over a random sample set of data.
Do you have a geographic distribution of the responses?
I don't have that map. We don't typically recreate that, but I could definitely create a dot map showing the distribution of responses across the city.
Yeah, no, I certainly wouldn't want to know the addresses of people who responded,
Sure.
more just like,
Yeah.
which general areas did we get responses from?
Yeah. So what we do when we provide geographic data to clients is basically not leverage, we round. And so if you're living at 123 Main Street, your survey would be put at 120 Main Street, right in the center of 120th and Main. And so while it might be close to a home address, what we're trying to really do is get a general or approximate location. And so when we create these maps, it's really just a dot map showing the approximate location of responses, but you can get a really good comprehensive view. Teresa, I would just want to make sure that we're using the most up-to-date GIS shapefiles for them. I'm pretty sure we shared those to start, but just to be sure. So
I'll follow up with you tomorrow.
cool.
All right, I think we have time for just one or two questions. We have a lot on the agenda still tonight, and we'll have the opportunity next month as well.
Okay, I have concern about the lumping of open space and park and rec in one survey. We're having two master plans, and it seems like things were really muddied by combining the survey. On one hand, you had a high percentage of people saying they valued most conservation in the open space. And on the other hand, you had a high percentage of people saying they wanted more trails. Those two things don't reconcile. And how are you gonna reconcile those apparently opposing interests?
Yeah, we had this comment the other night, Teresa, and I do beg to differ in terms of opposing opinions. And the reason for that is that we asked very specifically in terms of, hey, what types of recreation amenities and facilities would you like to see in the city? Separately from what do you think open space should be done with? What do you prefer to potentially do in open space? Undefined what open space is. And then also, what do you think the city of Golden should do with open space? So there were very distinct questions that provided very distinct results, including the preferred use of potentially hiking and biking, which we know is really an educational piece, but also a conservation piece where residents understand there's a extent of conservation that must go on. We managed the response options throughout those questions very carefully to ensure that we weren't mingling what could be done by the city with open space with non-open space activity uses. And so we were very careful with that question selection. I don't necessarily agree that it needs to be remedied to a degree. I think that the results need to be interpreted by question with a real focus on what that question read. And so I think that's really the key there.
I'm going to just add to that. I was just waiting. I know we don't have time to go into a lot of detail, and I've spoken with Teresa on the phone about this particular issue and the issues that I had. I haven't spoken with you, and thank you for your presentation tonight. It's really a matter of, I feel like there are two distinct elements of the survey, and they weren't properly presented structurally so that there would be ways for people to gain perspective on what is golden open space versus parks and rec and facilities and structures and improved parks. I don't think most people know that. And in fact, we had open space phase 1, and there were 3 elements of that plan that were adopted by city council: the mission, the vision, and the definition. And none of that was presented or accessible for people taking the survey to really understand, okay, here's where we're starting with the open space master plan, and with Parks and Rec, here's what we're doing. And I think the questions on your survey that related to facilities and parks and programs, I thought those were relatively straightforward, other than the pesticide question, and I've already addressed that in my notes from our meeting of 10-3 and in my discussions with Teresa and Chad. But I really do think that that was a fundamental flaw in the survey in terms of jumbling up those things. And I know you separated out open space, but I think it was confusing, and I don't think people really understood what open space was. They needed an introduction to why were we taking the survey, and that there are 2 distinct open space plans going forward. And I know in my discussion with Teresa and Chad that it was likely the survey was not going to be redone, but I would just say that that I have some ideas, and perhaps the most appropriate time to present those would be next month when Teresa, I think you'll be presenting to us in February, and you probably aren't going to present today, right, Teresa? Is it
That's
just
correct.
about the survey? So
That's correct.
I'll say that, but I have some ideas for what we might be able to post on the Guiding Golden website that might clear some of this up and put the survey in context, because I know the survey is just one part of the overall evaluation of how to move forward with the open space plans. But I've submitted those notes from our meeting on 10/3 and so that's all of record, but I'll talk about it more next month. But I really appreciate your time tonight presenting the survey results, and there's a lot in there that's helpful for Parks and Recs facilities, but that's my biggest thing is with open space.
All good, everybody? Thank you very much, Teresa and Ryan. Appreciate your time and effort. Teresa, we'll look forward to seeing you next month. And again, just a reminder that this team is here for you. So as time goes on, if you have additional questions, comments, or concerns, please submit them to Rhiannon and myself, and we'll make sure that we can get them addressed and be prepared at the next meeting. So thank you. Good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening.